you understand how healing works? By understanding the process, we can not only heal ourselves, but understand why. Welcome to the Healing Power Hour with host Suzanne Hill. In our program, we will show you the healing modalities and approaches that you can use to heal yourself, no matter the illness or the symptoms. Now, here is your host, Suzanne Hill.
Hi, everyone. This is Suzanne Hill, and welcome back to the Healing Power Hour. Thanks so much for listening today. So I've titled today's show, Understanding Romantic Love as it Relates to Soul Purpose. Again, another broad topic that I'm going to try to whittle down to some fundamental concepts for you to be able to see romantic love and the nature of romantic love relationships through a slightly different filter. And by the way, when I use the terminology romantic love, I'm meaning all relationships with a significant other, even those relationships that started out as romantic love years ago and have perhaps evolved into other things over time. These are still what I'm calling romantic love relationships, so as to distinguish them from love you might have for a friend or other family members. And I wanted to cover this topic because first and foremost, our ability to be in a healthy romantic love relationship has a significant impact on the state of our health and on our physical well-being. And that's because all healing comes from the state and quality of our heart energy. Just as the physical heart pumps blood to all parts of our body, so does our energetic heart center feed energy to all parts of our body. And if you've been listening to some of the teachings I've given in the beginning of my other shows, you'll know by now that having a vibrant and full energetic system is crucial to maintaining optimal physical health. I also wanted to cover this topic because I thought it was a great way to create a tie-in with today's guest, Dr. Amir Levine. Dr. Amir Levine is a psychiatrist currently in private practice in Manhattan who is also doing some interesting research up at Columbia University on the biological process of addiction. But why I wanted to have Amir come on the show today is because he's also co-author of a book I recommend very often in my practice. And that book is called Attached. That's the short title. The full title is Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. So that's a long title, but essentially the book discusses how we humans have a biological need to attach to others, and that while some theories on the dangers of codependence have perhaps given attachment a bad rap, attachment can actually be a healthy, positive thing. And this book talks about how there are three major attachment styles, three ways in which we attach to other human beings. And these three are the secure attachment style, which is basically, I love you, I know you love me. If you go away, I know that you'll come back. And when you come back, I know that you'll still love me. The second attachment style is what they call the anxious attachment style, which looks something like this. Do you love me? Are you sure you still love me? If you go away, will you come back? And if you come back, will you still love me? And the third style of attachment is what's called the avoidant attachment style, which looks something like this. I might love you, but I really need my freedom and independence. And if you get too close, I might feel like I don't love you anymore. So that's my simplistic description of the three attachment styles, but we'll have Dr. Amir Levine come on at about 20 past the hour to talk about it in his own words, and that should prove to be an intriguing discussion. I recommend this book because it's a very easy read to help us understand our own attachment styles as well as those of our partners so that we can create better relationships for ourselves. So on to romantic love and how it ties to soul purpose. Well, most people in the Western world believe in the concept of romantic love. And if you grow up in a country like America where there is largely freedom of choice about partners, a great love relationship is something that most of us hope to experience at some point in our lives. No matter what type of relationships we witnessed around us growing up, even if our parents fought all the time, if they divorced, if they had a functional relationship that was emotionally distant, despite all of that, most of us secretly still believe and hope, no matter what we may voice out loud to others, most of us still harbor the belief that yes, great love and a great relationship just might be possible for us anyway. And if we had partners who had the opposite, maybe they had a terrific relationship, we might be anxious that we won't be able to duplicate what our parents had, but we also secretly hope that maybe, perhaps, we just might be able to create that in our own lives as well. And this desire to experience great love and a great relationship is something that comes from deep within us. It's a profound and natural human desire. Oftentimes people meet and fall in love and don't really understand the purpose it serves in their lives on the level of the soul. And this is what I wanted to talk about with you today, because everything I've observed working with patients, from that, I've observed that there are three fundamental things that healthy love relationships do for us on a soul level. First of all, healthy love relationships help us to grow and expand in our ability to give love. Our attraction to that other person helps us to open our hearts, and we want to connect to that person and share ourselves with them. We may do things with or for that other person that we thought we'd never do. Maybe we go rock climbing, or we watch movies we'd never watched before, or we hear out a partner's opposing political view, something that we'd never listen to if just a friend was speaking. Our love also makes us want to take care of and nurture that other person in some way. Maybe we cook their favorite meal when they're having a bad day, or we help them out with their children. And so we start to understand the joy that comes from doing things for others. Of course, learning these things doesn't only come from loving a romantic partner, but for many of us, that's where our moving beyond the self starts to happen in a noticeable and an appreciable way. Secondly, healthy love relationships help us grow and expand in our ability to receive love, because when our partners love us, they hold a space for us to appreciate and love ourselves, both our good qualities and our flaws. Receiving love for many of us can actually be much harder than giving love for this reason. We have to learn to love ourselves so that we feel worthy of that love. If we don't, we might think that the other person will only love us until they discover that we're really not as great as they thought we were. Also, anytime we open up our hearts to let someone love us, we often feel the pain of how we weren't loved in the past in a particular time and space. So it can be a bittersweet experience, but one that's very healing. Oftentimes, this is why when we fall in love, our relationships with others, particularly our parents, can improve. It's not just because we're so happy that our parents don't annoy us anymore. It's because when we've learned to let the love of our significant other in, we can also begin to let the love of all others in, including our parents. And lastly, healthy love relationships help us to further our soul purpose in this lifetime. Any relationship that takes us off of our soul purpose will actually limit us and therefore have a finite time horizon. And what do I mean by soul purpose? What I mean by that is that each of us comes to this lifetime with very specific things to create or accomplish in this world. We have an external soul purpose and we have an internal soul purpose, and typically the two are intertwined. Some examples of an external soul purpose are as follows. We come to create art or music, or we come to invent or build things, whether that's a corporation or a family. Maybe we came to heal things and teach others, and so forth. So these are external soul purposes, things that we're here to do in our own special way. Now, we also have an internal soul purpose. Many times people call these soul lessons, and we have an internal soul purpose that we've come to accomplish. For example, perhaps in this lifetime, we're learning to transform deep anger, or we're learning to trust, or we're learning to get past our fear of self-expression or connection. Of course, we're generally learning a multitude of things over the course of a life, but there's usually one specific internal soul purpose or soul lesson that we have to work on that remains a thread throughout our lives, and that's the one I'm talking about here. So we have these soul purposes, both external or internal, and you can call them soul lessons, that we've come to work on in this lifetime that are intertwined. They're mutually beneficial. If we work on the internal soul purpose or soul lesson, it helps the external soul purpose and vice versa. And the key characteristic of a healthy love relationship is that it will nurture and further both of these purposes. To illustrate this clearly, I'll use myself as an example. One of my key soul purposes as Suzanne Hill in this lifetime is to heal others and to teach people about healing. And I love doing this. That's my external soul purpose. My internal soul purpose or lesson tied to this healing and teaching is that my work is helping me to gain confidence and release my fear of speaking the truth in public. So as long as I'm committed to these soul purposes in a balanced way, i.e., I don't let it consume my life, if I have a partner who understands that this is a fundamental part of my being here on the planet, and he's glad to support and nurture me on my path, then this helps to create a healthy relationship, and there can be longevity to that relationship. If, however, I have a partner who doesn't support me in this combined purpose, for example, perhaps they're complaining about how much time I spend with patients, or they're jealous of my accomplishments and don't like my growing confidence in public scenarios, then there will be a finite limit to how long I can be with that partner. So to recap, healthy love relationships do three things for us at the level of the soul. One, they help us to expand and grow in our capacity to give love. Two, they expand and grow in our capacity to receive love. And three, they support and nurture our ability to connect with and stay on our soul purpose and learn our soul lessons. Now, the next thing I wanted to address is the concept of connection and karma, because this is where I see a lot of people get tripped up when it comes to love relationships. We all know that when we meet somebody, that whether or not we feel a certain connection to that person. We may feel like we've known them forever, even if we've only talked to them for 10 minutes. We may feel completely at ease and at home with them. And that's what we call on the soul level a karmic connection. And what that means is that we've known these souls before in a prior lifetime. The stronger and more powerful the chemical attraction and connection is, the more likely it is that we were married or lovers before in a prior lifetime. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily believe in past lives, you can at least admit that there are some people you feel more connected to than others. So where people get tripped up is that when they meet somebody with whom they feel this powerful connection, they can get confused and think that this means that they're supposed to be with this person, that this person is, in fact, their soulmate. Well, the truth of the matter is, as I've seen it, is actually that this strong feeling of connection only means that you've known each other before. It does not necessarily mean that the two of you have what I call a forward-reaching soul purpose, which sits at the level of the heart, meaning that the two of you will help each other on your soul's path and help each other learn your soul lessons. You may have a deep karmic connection to the person, but a long-lasting love is not written into the future for the two of you. And the reason for that is that this person, while you may completely love and adore them, this person's not the best person to help you on your path. But if you get caught up in thinking, wow, I really feel that feeling of home with my partner, and so I can't let this relationship go, you're going to get yourself into some sticky tape. Believe me, the person you fall in love with who has the ability to further your soul purpose and help you learn your soul lessons will absolutely give you that feeling of home, and you will experience a deep love. You just might not feel it in the first handshake. It might be something you have to grow into. So why do you bump into these people you don't have forward-reaching soul purposes with? Is it just to torture us? Well, usually you're trying to tie up some loose ends and redefine and really refine your learning about certain things that's going to prepare you for your great love. Other times, these people are souls who come along to help us reconnect to our hearts. We have a short-term relationship or fling with them so that we can remember happiness, joy, and love, but it was never meant to be something long-term because our soul paths are going in two different directions. You're going to the North Pole and they're going to the South Pole, and you cross paths at a particular time and space to help each other along the way. But if you attach the feeling of home and try to make this relationship be something it isn't, it'll usually implode. Now, let's look at what happens when you fall in love with someone who is a person you have a forward-reaching soul purpose with. Then you do have the possibility for a solid long-term relationship, and that's wonderful. What you want to be aware of in these cases is that you have to do your human work in order to hold that love. By that, what I mean is that you want to be developing yourself as an individual. You want to get to know who you are as a human being, find out why you're here on the planet, what your soul purpose is, what your soul lessons are, improve your communication, and so forth. Because if either you or your partner don't do the work to allow the love to flourish and help each other along your paths, even if the karmic connection and the forward-reaching soul purpose is there, the relationship's not going to work. The one thing I learned early on in my practice is that people can have their soulmate standing right in front of them and not realize it because they haven't done the human work to hold that love, which is divine. And that shocked me because I naively thought at the time that your soulmate was your soulmate, and that was that. I have a female patient, Caroline, for example, who's been trying to get over a breakup for 2.5 years now. And it's been so hard for her because it was Caroline's first truly great love, where she felt completely cared for and wanted. Caroline had grown up with a single mother who had moved around a lot and had focused more on boyfriends than parenting. So when Caroline met this man who gave her the full attention and care she so needed, she was in love. Now, in this case, Caroline and her partner did have forward-reaching soul purpose, But unfortunately, her partner was unwilling to take on his primary soul lesson, which was breaking with his family's expectations of what his life was supposed to look like and live from his own value system. And so that relationship did not progress, unfortunately, and they broke up. These relationships can be the hardest ones to get over because you're not only mourning the loss of the love in the potential relationship, you're also mourning your partner's inability to connect with their soul path and purpose. When you truly love somebody, you desperately want them to take on their soul lessons and connect to their purpose in life, whether or not they choose to be with you. But the truth of the matter is, if they don't take on their lessons with you, they're probably not going to take them on without you in their lives. Now, how would Carolyn's boyfriend know that he was making a mistake in letting this relationship go? Well, when you're in a love relationship with a person that furthers your soul purpose, all aspects of your life start to get better. Your health improves, you sleep better, you have more energy and feel vibrant, you set healthier regimens for yourself, relationships with your family even improve, work opportunities open up, and money even can flow in despite whatever hardships might be out there. And why do these things happen? Well, they happen because when your connection with that other person is at the level of the heart and your soul purposes are combined, it opens your heart energy and everything flows from there. When you let go of that person, all those things tend to reverse over time. And in Carolyn's case, after her boyfriend ended the relationship, within months his health got worse. He was continually having back problems, he had insomnia, his business, which formerly had been going fantastic, started to have big losses, and his entire life turned into one big mess. Now, unfortunately, he didn't see the connection between the two, but Carolyn is still mourning that he didn't step up to take on his soul lessons so that that relationship could have continued and flourished. Many people want to believe that there is a destiny that's written out there for them when it comes to romantic relationships, but the truth is that destiny is a loosely delineated outline. Our destinies are moving targets depending on how much we're growing, learning, and applying on a daily basis. So I hope that today's talk will inspire you and give you the impetus and motivation to work on your human side in order for you to hold your great love, whether you have it now already in your lives or whether it is something that's still in the process of coming your way. So that ends my part of the show. I know that was a lot, but of course, if you download the show, you can listen to it several times, which is what some of my patients tell me they're doing. I hope that today's teaching at a minimum opens up your perspective of relationships and why they are what they are. We're going to go to break now, and when we return, I'll be speaking with Dr. Amir Levine, co-author of this terrific book titled Attached. Thank you. Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is Suzanne Hill, and I'm on the line now with Dr. Amir Levine, who is co-author of the book Attached, the full title being Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. Dr. Levine, or Amir, I can call you. Thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here.
So to start out, I was wondering if you could give listeners a brief overview of the three predominant attachment styles you delineate in your book. I gave my overview, but I'd like people to hear it from you, your own words.
Okay. All right. No, great. So it turns out that there's really like a science behind how we behave in romantic relationships, and it has to do a lot with how we get attached to one another. And it turns out that we get attached to one another in three specific styles, which is the anxious, avoidant, and secure. So if you have an anxious attachment style, it all has to do with how comfortable you feel with intimacy and closeness, but also how preoccupied you get with the relationship. So someone who has an anxious attachment style, like if you have one, you would get you love to be close, you love to be intimate, but you also tend to get to worry a lot about the relationship and worry a lot about not being loved back. Small things can really bother you, and that you can feel threatened by them. So that's the anxious attachment style. The secure attachment style are people who also love to be close and intimate, but actually they're not that preoccupied with the relationship, and they don't to worry so much. And then finally, it's the avoidant attachment style. And these people also want to be in a relationship because, and I'll explain later, we're all hardwired through our biology to want to be in a relationship, almost all of us. But then the funny thing happens is that once they get into a relationship, they start feeling uncomfortable with too much closeness and intimacy, and they tend to they have different ways of keeping their partners at arm's length. So that's the avoidant attachment style. These are the three styles.
Okay, and now in your book you talk about percentages of what percentage of people are these different attachment styles.
Right, exactly. This is one of the reasons I decided to write this book is because with my co-author Rachel Heller is because this is such good news. It turns out that more than 50% of the population, about 54% of the population, have a secure attachment style, which both men and women, which means that there's a lot of people out there who are really good at being in relationships. We like to call them the supermates of evolution. That's what we call them. They have a talent at how to be in a relationship, and they can also teach you, if you have an insecure attachment style, which is either anxious or avoidant, how to become more secure, which is fantastic.
Now, what happens when one of the things I saw in your book is that if over time avoidants become greater and greater part of the pool because they tend not to attach in a relationship, how do avoidants even decide to enter into a committed relationship? What makes them cross the line?
Okay, so what happens is the following. What happens is that usually what we really recommend for people to do is to, first of all, learn how to identify their own attachment style. And we even have a questionnaire on our website where you can sort of identify your own attachment style. And then also to learn how to identify other people's attachment styles. And we recommend people, both avoidant and anxious, to go secure, to sort of go out and date. And then really people will tell you everything and recognize who's secure and go with that relationship because as I mentioned before, they will make your life so much better. Just the way that you mentioned earlier in your show, how it really opens your life to new opportunities, better financial opportunities, better love opportunities. It really, really makes you healthier even. There's all these amazing studies that shows the benefit of being with someone secure. So that's just one thing. And then about the avoidant, it's true that there are more avoidant in the dating pool just because it takes them less time to get over a relationship, and also it takes them much longer to commit. But eventually, if they meet someone secure, but also unfortunately, there's this attraction between anxious and avoidant because they kind of like reaffirm each other's worst beliefs about people and how they should behave and about their relationship. But there's a draw between anxious and avoidant, and so that's the place where a lot of the relationship drama happens.
So what does an anxious avoidant relationship look like?
Oh my God, it's just like really, let me give you an example. Suppose suppose your husband is going to the airport and you tend to be really anxious and tend to be you're a worrier, you tend to worry. So they're going to the airport, it's horrible weather, so you text them, they're going on a very important business trip, they're very stressed out. You text them, they see your text, but they're busy, they're not answering. So then you call them again, then you text them and call them again, they're not responding. At one point they look at the phone, it's like, oh my God, this person is so needy, they just turn off the phone.
So in that case, I would be the anxious and my husband would be the avoidant.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then by the time they get to their hotel room at 2 a.m. at night, they call you, you're at the edge of your seat on the other side of the phone, and you're like getting into a huge fight. So he will not perform very well the next day when he has to go to his business meeting, and you're going to have a hard time sleeping, and you get like this fight, and it's just terrible. But suppose your husband was secure. So he knows that you tend to worry. So on the way to the airport, he would text you quickly. And then just before the plane takes off, he texts you. And when the plane lands, he texts you again. So by the time he gets to the airport, to the hotel at 2 a.m., he calls you. He goes straight into voicemail. You're already sleeping. You're not worried at all. And then he does very well the next day, and you go about your business the next day. You see the big difference?
Yeah,
so
that's a big difference.
One particular interaction and multiply it by thousands and thousands of time, and you get the difference of quality between a relationship with someone secure or between anxious and avoidant.
So what creates us to have an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style, or what makes us be secure? Is it largely from our childhood, or what have your studies shown?
So the studies are not completely there's not a complete agreement about what is the cause of our attachment style. It's partially by certain effects, the things that happen to us in our upbringing, but it also has a genetic component. And basically what a lot of the attachment style is, it's what they call in attachment science a working model. It's a set of beliefs and expectations that we have about our environment and about relationships. And also, but it's not only that. It's not just like, what we believe in, but it's also, it changes our perception. So if we have an anxious attachment style, we have a tendency, we have a more sensitive radar system. So a lot of studies show that actually they're able to pick up a lot of cues that are correct. So it's not that they're mistaken, they're correct in many ways, but the problem is sometimes it's not good to notice too many things. Let's say your wife comes home and you're an anxious person, or the husband, you're anxious and you're waiting at night and she's in bad mood. Let's say she had a hard day at work. So you can notice rightly that she's in a bad mood. But then you tend to take it personally because you're noticing it so vividly. And that's where it actually becomes more of a problem because sometimes it's for secure people, they don't notice that many small details and they don't take it personally because they just don't notice it.
So an anxious person can project onto their partner perhaps and say, they can personalize and say, well, you're upset, maybe it has to do with me, when it might not have to do with them at all.
It's not. I mean, oftentimes they feel the correct emotions that are going on. Where someone secure may not feel it, they can actually sense emotions very well and very accurately. But sometimes the interpretation, the belief system is that, oh, they don't love me enough. I'm not loved enough. But usually that's not the case. When we're there with someone secure, they oftentimes become more secure because they give them, like the way that I gave you the example. If you just like give them a little bit of what they need, they actually tend to respond very well and become less anxious. Like you just, and it doesn't take a lot. You just like, how long does it take to send a text message? Like 3 seconds, right? Tell them that you're okay.
Well, that was one of my questions. If you are a secure person and your partner's anxious and you communicate with them in such a way as to relieve their anxiety, you know how to work with them. Does that kind of communication actually help them move beyond their anxiety?
Tremendously.
Or it does? Or do they just
tremendously.
expect
Sorry,
that from
I jumped
everyone?
In, but I just had to say it. Tremendously
okay.
so.
Okay.
It's
so
just
that
like
they don't continually become needy, that everyone has to treat them that way.
That's the beauty of this. That's again one of why I like this science so much, and why I decided together with Rachel Heller to write this book is because people attachment styles, even though they're fixed, they're also malleable and they can change. And the easiest way to change your attachment style is to get together with someone secure, because they're just so good at being in relationships. They're like it's like basically getting a relationship coach built into the relationship, and they'll coach you how to become more secure. So, for example, and they sort of have one of the great things about people who are secure, we like to call it, they have a certain philosophy, we like to call it the happy wife, happy life philosophy. But they have this innate understanding that your well-being is their well-being. If you're going to be happy, they're going to be happy. If you're going to be upset, they're going to be upset. So they take care of your needs just as if they were your needs, their needs, I mean. So your needs are their needs, and they know that, and that's how they act in their relationship. That's a very big difference, and we can go again back to that example when he looks at the phone and he's like, okay, let her take care of her needs. She needs to know that I'm okay, but I can't be there for her now. She needs to be able to deal with it on her own. That kind of thinking does not exist. It's very well within the way that someone avoidant feels, because that's how they think. They think people should be self-reliant, people should be independent, and they actually confuse self-reliant with independent, which is not at all the same thing. So they're just like, okay, you take care of your own thing. People who are secure never think that.
Mm-hmm. But what you talk about in your book is that avoidance, even though they act like they're not really needy, and they might even be annoyed by people who are needy, they actually can be quite needy underneath.
Yes, isn't that strange? So it's like you would think, even for example, you think, okay, two avoidants, they'll be perfect for one another. Each one believes in their self-sufficiency. They should be independent. They should have their own space. Perfect for one another. They should really find each other, seek each other out, and just hook up and be very happy with one another. But the interesting thing is that the statistics show something very different, is that there's hardly ever a case in which avoidants get together and stay together in a relationship. And we don't really know exactly why they don't, but that's just a fact. And it seems like almost, there's really no glue that keeps them together. They need to feel that someone else needs them. It's as though sometimes they really need to know. Again, they will also do very well with someone who is secure, someone who is avoidant. They can also become more secure, but they don't do well when they're with someone anxious who puts pressure on them to become closer, because that only aggravates them and makes them feel, no, you should back away and leave me alone. They get overwhelmed.
Right. One of the things you mentioned in the avoidance style was that when a partner starts to get close and they feel the need to push away, they'll start to reminisce about a phantom ex, meaning an old partner that got away
Oh
or.
gosh, yes.
So why does that mechanism kick in?
Okay, so what avoidant people have, again, so the thing is with attachment science, the whole idea, it's very evolutionary based. So it's based on the idea that at one point there was a huge advantage in evolution for us to pair up and be attached. Because those who paired up survived, those who didn't pair up ended up more often so as like basically tiger food. There was a huge sense of safety to be together with someone else that you actually work together towards the same goal. It was just safer. So the thing is, so even avoidance, they have this mechanism in their mind that they want to get together with someone. But what happens once they get together, they start to feel uncomfortable with too much closeness. So what do they do in order to minimize closeness? They call it in attachment lingo, attachment science, it's called deactivating strategies. They do things to deactivate the attachment system. So one of the ways of doing it is always bringing like a phantom X into the mix. Always sort of like, if it's always like another presence of an imaginary person, whether real or not, it's much easier to always keep you at bay and not completely be close to you. And oftentimes we find, like I can even give you one example of one woman who, when she was in a relationship with someone, she was like, oh, but the one that was before you, he was much more intellectual. He read all these books, and he was so much better. And then she left him, and then she met someone who was very intellectual. And she said, oh, but the one before you was always into sports. We always exercised together. It was so wonderful. She always sort of found some shortcoming in the relationship, but that helps you from being close. It always sort of keeps it puts a caveat into the relationship. And that's a way of minimizing intimacy. And they have many other ways of minimizing intimacy.
What are some other deactivating strategies for the avoidance?
Some of them are very like funny, actually. Like there's a friend I can tell you about someone that I know. I call her Sarah. She went on a trip to Paris. She was planning this really romantic getaway for her and her husband. And she was thinking, oh, we're going to go walk hand in hand down the Seine, and we're going to have such a wonderful romantic time. Only when they got there, she found that he was always walking a few steps ahead of her. Mm-hmm. Always walking, and no matter how fast she was trying to walk, he would even walk faster and faster. She could never really catch up with him. And so think about it, that's a deactivating strategy. Going on a vacation, romantic vacation, is a huge opportunity to be very, very close. But for him, it was just too much. So his way of sort of minimizing intimacy was to sort of walking a few steps ahead of her. Now, thank God for him, Sarah is actually secure. So she's like, she knows her husband's sort of little quirks. And she's like, okay, so she just scheduled for them to have a lot more stops at different cafes on the way so they can catch up and talk about what they've seen. Mm-hmm. But if it were someone anxious, they would like, I can't believe I came all the way to Paris, France, just to watch his or her butt in front of me all the time. They would get so upset. And once they get to the next cafe, they would get into a huge fight, and like a third world war will erupt between them, threatening to ruin the vacation.
We're going to have to go to break soon, but can you give one more example of how a secure person can help an avoidant become more secure?
Oh, so like the one example was, so even just like a small example, when they talk about their phantom X, if, if you're someone secure, you just know instinctively it's like, okay, they're just bringing it up because they need to sort of like feel there's someone else there. And so sometimes it's not even an example. It's just like, you just let it go. You don't bring it up. You don't sort of make it into a big fight. And you're just like, oh yeah, they were like that. That sounds really great. They sound like they're really, like they have this amazing talent. And they're just like, let it go.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to go to break, but when we come back, I want to start asking you some questions about the anxious attachments and how anxious people can end relationships that aren't healthy for them, because that can be very hard, what you write in your book. Yes. Okay, thank you. We'll be back soon. Hi, everybody. This is Suzanne Hill. I'm talking with Dr. Amir Levine, author of the book Attached. And when we went to break, we were talking about avoidance, the avoidant attachment style, and their deactivating strategies, things that kept people at a distance, to keep connection and intimacy at bay. But I wanted to move on now to the anxious type of attachment style and have you, Dr. Levine, talk about how anxious people feel in relationships. Somewhere in your book, you talked about it actually lights up certain centers in their brain, the anxious attachment. So I was wondering if you could address that.
Oh yeah. So the thing is, you can also lump them together as insecure attachment styles, and so they both have the same. Both the anxious and the avoidant are the insecure attachment styles, and they have the same premise in life, which means life is dangerous, it's unsafe, and we can't really trust we can't fully trust the other person to be there for us. So it's just a different tactic. So what the avoidants do is like, okay, we're going to repress our whole need to be with someone else. And then for someone anxious, it's like they choose the opposite solution. It's like, okay, we're going to be hyper vigilant and make sure that the person is there and they're available to us. And if not, we're going to engage in what we called, they call that, now I'm blocking on the name. It's some sort of, I'm going to think about it in a minute. But it's not, they engage in, it's protest behavior, which is any type of behavior that will cause the other person to pay attention to them again and reestablish the contact. So basically what happens is that, as I said before, someone who's anxious loves to be intimate, loves to be close, but yet tends to have a very, very sensitive radar system that really notices any threat or potential threat in the relationship and then engages in protest behavior. So like for example, like basically texting a lot and wanting to get the reassurance that their partner, when they're going to the airport, that they're okay. That's just one example. So they have a much harder time. Like there was one study where they told them, think about something negative about the relationship. And then they told them, okay, stop thinking about the negative thing. But someone who had an anxious attachment style had a much harder time to stop thinking about the anxious stuff. And they could see even in brain scans that those areas that have to do with negative emotions and difficult emotions refuse to basically sort of quiet down. Whereas with the avoidant and the secure, they were able to quiet them down. And I think a lot of people who are anxious feel that way. They know, oh my God, I wish I stopped ruminating about this. I wish I just stop, but they can't. And that's
so what are some strategies? So what are some strategies that help them calm that part down?
So I think one of the best strategies that will help an anxious person come down is to find a secure person. Because, and I know maybe it sounds a little bit
easier said than done.
Well, if you're actually dating and you're going out, it's actually easier than you would think. It's just learning a new language, the language of attachment. And that's why I said you have to, and in our book we have a whole questionnaire about how you can tell other people's attachment styles. And it's easier if you basically don't spend a lot of time on the avoidant and you move on to the secure. So because someone who's secure, again, they have this whole philosophy that your well-being is their well-being. So they take care of you before you go into that really difficult place that it's really hard for you to get out from. With someone who's avoidant, it becomes much, much harder. I mean, you can practice that, but it's just harder because your whole system is built to be sensitive like that. And there's actually some benefits to it. I have one example where a man that I know that has an anxious attachment style woke up his wife. Actually, his wife is the one who deal with all of the finances. He woke up in the morning one day and told his wife, I have a bad feeling we have to sell all of our stock. We just have to sell it. And that was in 2008, just like two weeks before the market crashed. And she did that. He called her every 10 minutes until she sold all of the stock. And then they were saved from a huge financial loss. So there are advantages to having an anxious attachment style. You're on top of things. You sense things that other people don't sense. But you have to do it with the right person.
Well, I can probably tell that people with an anxious attachment style have a hard time ending the relationship. So how can you have any recommendations for them to do that?
Okay, yeah, that's really a good question. So what happens when we get attached to someone, and I didn't say that before, is that we became, there's a bad rep for dependency. People think that dependency is something bad, but it's neither good or bad. It's just a fact. It's a biological fact. Once we choose someone else from the crowd as special and unique to us, we become dependent on them. That's just our biology. And not only dependent psychologically, but also physiologically. as you actually mentioned in the other part of your show, like they actually start to control the things we don't have control over, how we breathe, how we sleep, our heart rate. There's even one study that shows that if you're in a good relationship and you get a cut, it will heal faster than if you're in not a good relationship. So we're that dependent. It's amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when we break up? So when we break up, we become one physiological and psychological system with a person, and when we break up, we actually break that one unit, and it can be very, very painful. It's like coming from multiple different drugs all at the same time. Like you go into this very, very painful mode, and there are actually some imaging studies that show that the same areas in the brain that light up when we are injured, like if you break a leg, the same areas in the brain also light up when we are when we break up from a relationship.
So it registers pain. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so it's just like areas of pain. It's not just metaphorically painful. It is painful. And there's actually some studies that show that Tylenol actually helps a little bit alleviate that pain because it's real pain.
So you can take Tylenol when you break up with your boyfriend?
Yes, you can.
And it'll help the pain?
It's shown that it helps you.
Interesting.
Just don't take too much.
Right, sure.
So, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So the problem is, and that's another very interesting thing, is that these research has also shown that and that's actually really, it's kind of strange, that the worse the relationship is, the harder and the more painful the breakup is.
Interesting.
And I think it's very interesting, and I think it's also very reassuring because people feel, oh, it's so painful, it must be that I'm just like really having a hard time letting go of this. This was such a good relationship, and people, especially people who are anxious, have this problem when they actually, after they break up, they forget all about the bad things that happened in their relationship, and they can only remember the good things. And that's their mind playing tricks on them to go back into their relationship.
So they think they made a mistake. That's probably the downfall to anxious attachers when they end the relationship.
What happens is that their attachment system gets so activated that they can't even see the bad things anymore. We call it like seeing the world through sort of rose-tinted glasses. Like you can't really see the bad things anymore. Like their mind really plays tricks on them, and that's why they feel, oh, I made a horrible mistake. But I think it's helpful to know that the research shows that the more pain you feel, the more likely it is that the relationship was actually not so good. Because if the relationship was good, then you leave, even though it ends, you leave with a sense of purpose. You leave with a sense that they've done you well, that you were loved. And I think when it's not good and it ends in a lot of pain, it was very, very painful. I don't know, for some reason it's just like it's heart-wrenching.
Wow. So in all the study that you've done with the different attachment styles, what do you recommend for couples to improve the relationships? What areas of growth serve the couple the best?
So that's so basically, we spend the latter half of our book attached. Really, we went and we interviewed a lot of secure people, and we found that there's a method to their amazing talent. And we sort of really spent half of the book just sort of outlining some of the secure methods of how to become more secure. And one of the funniest things that sometimes, well, first of all, is to get together with someone secure. Another one is to think about secure role models in our lives. And that actually is proven to be very, very helpful it's called secure priming. It's either going to the movies and watching or reading stories about people who are in great relationships, or even thinking about people in our lives that are in really good relationships and thinking about what they would do. That's
modeling ourselves after people.
Yeah, and then, even we ourselves have we always have a kernel of security inside us. I always like to give that as an example. I don't know if do you have a pet?
No, I don't.
Well, many people, like when people have pets, especially if you have a dog at home, and I think people can really relate to that, we tend to be a lot more forgiving towards our pets than towards our partners. And
Absolutely.
They do sometimes really annoying things. They can destroy things around the house. They can wake up us. They can wake us up at night, throw up on our pillow. Yet we tend to be a lot more forgiving towards our pets than we are towards our partners. And so we can tap into that as a secure role model, even within us. And I think we all have that, and then in people around us. But there are also other concrete things that secure people do.
Like?
So for example, so one thing is like really understanding that your well-being is their well-being, but they know how to communicate very effectively. Like they know how to really kind of say what's bothering them, and also they fight really fair. They fight really, really fair. I don't know if we have enough time. I can give you another small example.
Yes, we have 3 minutes.
Okay, so let me give you a very quick example so you'll see what it means they fight fair. Like suppose, let's say your husband is actually cooking dinner for your parents. Let's say it's like the first time you're inviting them over. And he's a great cook and he's making all these dishes and he sends you to the supermarket with a list of produce. He asks you for A, B, and C. So you come back, but you bring actually X, Y, and Z. You didn't even notice. So if he is insecure, he would start yelling at you like, you never listen to me, you don't even care, I can't believe you did this, I'm sitting here in the kitchen all day cooking, and it's your parents, I don't even need this, who needs this, I'm out of here, I don't want to stay here, really get into this huge fight. But if he were secure, he would fight very, very differently. He'd still be upset, but he would say, I'm very upset with you now. Like in 2 hours are coming here. I asked for very specific things. I really wanted this to be a success. Listen, you just got to go back to the supermarket and get me this as soon as possible. And you need to also help me with this, and that, because otherwise, it's just going to be very disappointing. So see what a different approach when you're secure. You don't go into generalities when you fight. You don't really threaten to leave. You don't do things that are really scarring for the relationship. You stay on target. You do express how unhappy you are, but you don't really go to the jugular. You don't kick someone under. You just, like you say, very specific, and then most probably you're going to actually the result will be you're going to end up getting what you wanted, whereas the result with the insecure form of communication is that either that dinner is not going to happen at all, or you're going to be sitting and sulking all night together with our parents.
Not having a good time. So to recap, what you're saying is that what I'm hearing you say is that people who are secure in their attachments have an ability to, one, to know themselves, two, to expect that the relationship does have a good future, and three, that they're good at communicating without destroying the other person.
Exactly. They're good at fighting. They're good at expressing what their needs are from very early on in their relationship. They're not afraid of being close. And there's a whole bunch of other little things that they do that we really outline. Like it's basically half of the book is basically dedicated to that.
Well, I've recommended your book to a lot of my patients, both male and female, and it's interesting because, as you say, once you learn the attachment styles, it's really easy to see. So when you meet people, you can see it quite clearly. And if we're going to then be avoiding the avoidance, there's probably going to be even more avoidance in the pool. I guess the good news is then the avoidance might want to actually step up and start to take on their intimacy issues and their communication.
Right, exactly. So the thing is, the beautiful thing is we didn't get the time to talk a lot about that during dating, like dating behavior. Is if you learn to date like a secure person, you learn to actually really voice and say what you're looking for, and you don't play games. What tends to happen is that you're really screening away people who can't step up to the plate. Let's say you really want to go. We have actually an example like that in the book of someone that we know who was 40 years old. She really wanted to get married and she wanted to have kids as soon as possible. She's been dating for a long time, and she's been in a series of not so good relationships. So she started going out, and on the first date, she would say, I'm just like so looking forward to getting married and having kids in a positive way, not in a way that leaves her vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, maybe she sent a few men running, but then after a very short time, she met someone else who was interested in the same thing, and that's what they did. They got married and they had kids.
That's a great note to end the story on. Thank you so much, Dr. Levine, for being on the show today and talking about Attached. Everybody who hasn't gotten it, please get the book, or you can go onto Amir Levine's website. It's called attachthebook.com, and you can take your personality test and find out what attachment style you are. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, listening to the Healing Power Hour. Again, as I always say, knowledge is power. Please make use of the knowledge you have learned today. Much love to you all.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. Please join Suzanne Hill for another edition of the Healing Power Hour next Wednesday at 11 a.m. in the West, 2 p.m. in the East on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. Have a healthy week.